Premonition. When I say the word, what do you think? The dictionary says that a premonition is a strong feeling that something unpleasant might happen, a foreshadowing without conscious reasoning. It's the voice in your head, the feeling of foreboding, a feeling of dread. This video will discuss some of the premonitions the crew and passengers had prior to the sinking of the RMS Titanic. Esther and Eva Hart. 7-year-old Eva Hart was a second-class passenger who always remembered the sinking. She claims that her mother had a premonition that saved her life. Her mother, Esther, said that saying a ship was unsinkable is, quote, flying in the face of God. Esther would sleep during the day and remain vigilant at night by staying awake. She was awake when the ship hit the iceberg. Her family had a chance to escape. And while Eva and Esther were able to escape, Father Benjamin Hart refused to get on Lifeboat 14 with his family to give the women and children a chance to flee. A book was written about Eva's time on the Titanic in 2012, titled Eva and Little Kitty on the Titanic. Number 9. John Coffey. John Coffey was 23 years old at the time of the sinking. He was a fireman in the Stoker boiler room for the White Star Line on the Olympic and later the Titanic. After a fire in the boiler room during the first leg of the trip, John began having uneasy feelings about going to America on the ship. In Queenstown, he hid among the mailbags and departed the ship before Titanic set sail on her final voyage. John began working for Cunard Line later in April 1912, where he was also a fireman. He finally made his way across the Atlantic on the Mauretania. He passed away in 1957 in Hull, England. Number 8. Jonathan Shepard. In 1911, Jonathan was aboard the RMS Olympic when it collided with the HMS Hawke, a warship. Approximately 1 year later, Junior Second Assistant Engineer Jonathan Shepard perishes with the RMS Titanic. Prior to the sailing of the Titanic, Jonathan's father claims he was, quote, down in the dumps. Upon asking his son, "What are you afraid of? Are you afraid of death?" Jonathan answers, "No, I'm not afraid of death, but I don't want to go." Jonathan's father suggests that he had an inkling that something bad was about to happen. On the night of the sinking, Jonathan is trying to set up pumps in the Boiler Room 5 to get rid of the water pooling in the boiler room. He slipped on a raised access panel and broke his leg. While getting help to move to the pump room after the accident, the bulkhead was breached and Jonathan and the 2 men helping him would drown. Number 7. Morgan Robertson. Author Morgan Robertson wrote Futility, or Wreck of the Titan, in 1898. Morgan claims that he just wrote the book based on his knowledge of shipbuilding. However, there were way too many similarities between the Titan and the Titanic. Some of the similarities: both were, quote, practically unsinkable. They were roughly 270 meters, speeds of 20 knots. There was barely a legal number of lifeboats. Both sank approximately 400 nautical miles from Newfoundland in the month of April in the evening/overnight hours, and both collided with an iceberg. Was Morgan Robertson psychic? Did he know what would happen? What do you think? Number 6. George and Edith Vanderbilt. George and Edith Vanderbilt traveled the world. These first-class passengers traveled for antiques, oriental rugs, tapestries, and artwork. Before boarding the Titanic, the family's footman, Edwin Charles Wheeler, loaded their antiquities into the boat's stateroom where the Vanderbilts would stay. A family member of the couple stated, quote, "So many things can go wrong on a maiden voyage." This put doubts and reservations into the Vanderbilts' mind, causing them to rebook their trip to the Olympic. Unfortunately, all of their antiquities were still on the Titanic at the time of the sinking, as well as their footman, Edwin, who lost his life. Number 5. Henry Wilde. As a chief officer on the Titanic's sister ship, the RMS Olympic, Henry Wilde was ordered to await instructions in Southampton for joining the maiden voyage of the RMS Titanic. Upon arriving in Queensland, Ireland, Henry pens a letter to his sister and says, quote, I still don't like this ship. I have a queer feeling about it. Although he had reservations about the ship, Henry continues on. The night of the sinking, he works to fill the lifeboats and used a gun to prevent crew from taking over the lifeboats. Henry was last seen trying to free collapsible lifeboats. Henry perished with the sinking. Number 4, Alex Mackenzie. Alex Mackenzie was 24 years old when he boarded the Titanic in Southampton, when a voice in his head warned him that he would lose his life on the ship. He shook it off, but after hearing it 2 more times, he decided not to board. The third warning was the strongest. He either had a second or third-class ticket from his grandparents. His family was not pleased with him wasting money on this ticket, but were relieved that he didn't get on the ship when they heard of the disaster. Number 3, Edith Corse Evans. Edith was a first-class passenger returning back to New York after a trip to Europe. She traveled with Mrs. John Murray Brown, Mrs. Edie Appleton, and Mrs. R.C. Cornell. Edith also became acquainted with Colonel Archibald Gracie. Edith told her new acquaintance, Colonel Gracie, that a fortune teller once gave her the warning to, quote, beware of water. She was convinced there was truth behind this prophecy. Multiple accounts stated that Edith gave up her seat on a lifeboat that night to one of the sisters she was traveling with because she had children at home. Unfortunately, Edith was one of 5 first-class female passengers who perished in the disaster. The others were Helen Lorraine Allison, a young child who was the only first-class child victim, Bess Allison, mother to Helen, Anne Eliza Esom, who refused to board a lifeboat without her dog, and Ida Strauss, who stayed with her husband, the co-owner of Macy's department store. Number 2, Edith Rosenbaum Russell. Edith Rosenbaum Russell was a 33-year-old first-class passenger who was traveling after she reported on the fashion at Paris's Easter Sunday races. In a letter to her secretary, Edith wrote, quote, I'm going to take my very much needed rest on this trip, but I cannot get over my feeling of depression and premonition of trouble. How I wish it were over. Edith was on Lifeboat 11 when rescued. Her small toy musical pig was with her at the time of the rescue. It is said that the music from the toy provided comfort to the passengers on the lifeboat and those nearby. She was rescued hours after the sinking. Throughout the rest of her life, she traveled extensively. She even survived tornadoes, car accidents, and another shipwreck. Bonus, Alice Catherine Cooper. Alice Catherine Cooper was a nursemaid for the Allison family. The night of the sinking, Alice rescued the youngest child, Hudson Trevor. During the voyage, she had felt uneasy and didn't feel good about being on the ship. When it began to sink, she took Hudson Trevor from the room, but did not let her employers know. The rest of the Allison family perished due to their searching for Hudson Trevor and Alice. There is not much known about Alice after the sinking. Number 1, William T. Sneed. William T. Sneed was an English newspaper editor traveling to New York on the Titanic as a first-class passenger. He was headed to a conference at Carnegie Hall at the request of U.S. President Taft. In 1885, he received accolades for a series of articles that were written in support of raising the age of consent from 13 to 16. In 1886, William wrote a short fiction piece titled How the Atlantic Mail Steamer Went Down by a Survivor. It told of a ship that sank with 916 passengers and includes a horrific scene of passengers drowning due to the lack of lifeboats, which would only hold 400. There was hysteria when the lifeboats were lowered with fewer people than the boats could hold. At the end of the story, 700 people were on the ship when it sinks. The story ends with, quote, "This is exactly what might take place and will take place if liners are sent to sea short of boats." William was a victim of the sinking. His body was never recovered. Rumors have circulated that he was last seen in the first-class smoke room where he was reading a book as the ship was sinking. Do you believe any of these passengers had premonitions of the horror that might happen the night of April 14th and 15th, 1912? Did we miss stories of premonitions? Tell us below what you think.